So, it's that time again. Let's talk about Heavy in New Vegas. Now, I remember saying in the Dimmerman video that all the classes from this point forwards are basically a lot more straightforward and less wacky than Scout, Soldier, and Pyro were. Because I effectively think every class from this point onwards would go House, so there you go, spoilers for the future. I think a lot of it is describing the ins and outs of where or why they go for House, if you know what I mean. Because Heavy's a lot like Spy. He's very mercenary, he only really cares about his own bottom line. I can't imagine either of these characters caring too much about politics, one way or the other. But it does ultimately depend which version of Heavy you want to sort of portray, because this is going to be an issue with some of the other classes I've got to talk about, because I don't know if I mentioned it, but I'm a big Engineer fan. Engineer is my favorite class in the game. And while thinking about what I'm going to do for that video, I've definitely made Engineer a lot more altruistic and willing to do the things that I'd want to do rather than doing things that maybe he'd do in canon. And I wouldn't want to make that same mistake with Heavy, because as much as I love Heavy, I don't think he's super sympathetic to people around him. He definitely has a soft spot for people, but like, usually he's just out for himself. Like, the idea of Heavy being this big, cuddly, gentle giant is the most amazing thing in the world to me, but I don't know how accurate it is to his actual character, because he seems to enjoy doing a bit of the old murdering, you know? Like, I know, like with the Demoman video, I'm probably gonna get a bunch of Heavy fans who are gonna disagree with how sort of cold I think he'd kinda be. You guys are great, but I'm gonna disagree because I'm weird and I want to be contrarian because I'm a big dum-dum. I think it's super interesting hearing alternate takes on these characters because I feel like I put them one way, but then a lot of people have a lot of very random like opinions on these characters that I don't always agree with. For example, someone put a huge paragraph on my demo video talking about how the Demomen, or the DeGroots rather, are such a hardworking family that they have so many jobs that they're really good at and they're very sought after. But I didn't necessarily agree with that because number one, alcohol funny. Number two, all the classes are described as rejects in TF2, so although sometimes, because I swear this line comes from Demo's mum, she's hardly gonna say, sorry Tavish, we're all a bunch of losers. She's gonna kind of be like, oh, we were the greatest demo men in the world. Don't ask anyone else about us, I swear. But anyway, that's tangent number one out of the way. Let's get back to Heavy. Actually, now that I think about it, I just realized, so I just posted this short where I did the comic and I talked about this. I realized in the comic I said that Heavy wouldn't do anything with like side quests or companions, but I've drawn him at the end in the XO1 armor, which you need to do a side quest and meet a companion for, so I've kind of contradicted myself a little bit. I think you continue drawing it in the background. Wow, look at me go. I'm joking. Nobody watches the backgrounds of my videos. I don't think anyway, because my editing is so bare bones that I don't know if I've got the head for editing, so I feel like it would take way too long. But anyway, I believe my boy Mikhail over here would be fully on board with Mr. House, because I feel like Heavy is very, very mercenary, which is a line I use a lot when it comes to, and I'm going to use a lot going forward with a lot more of these classes, but I feel like this is mostly accurate to Heavy because Heavy cares about two things, guns and family. And anything else besides that is just in his way. Because if you think about it, if these characters are gonna exist in the Fallout universe, we presume these are like Fallout versions of the characters. Like, Heavy didn't fall down a wormhole in the Badlands and end up in the Mojave. We presume this is a version of Heavy who grew up in the Wasteland, and like, the Wasteland's obviously shaped him a little bit, which has a whole bunch of other implications, because would he really be the exact same person he was in TF2 if he was brought up in the land of Fallout? Probably not. But I would imagine Heavy does have a family he wants to sort of keep secret and keep supporting through all his mercenary work. Actually, I like the idea of Heavy's like family being a previous employment of New Reno. I can't remember the family's names at the top of my head from New Reno, but I'd imagine his dad pissed off one of those guys, the same way his dad in canon in TF2 pissed off the Soviets, and now he's hiding from the New Reno people trying to keep his family out of trouble. Kind of like that guy that's hiding out in the Novak hotel, that if you go in, he goes, oh, Mr. Bishop didn't send you, did he? That guy. But instead of a jumpy singer, it's Heavy's mum and three sisters. So that's my headcanon. Heavy worked for the Mojave Express, so he could afford to keep his mum and sisters in hiding from the evil New Reno people, and Benny was like, the game was rigged from the start. I don't know why he's doing that voice, but he is. But now that I'm thinking about it, it kind of brings up an interesting dilemma with how good of a person Heavy is. Because I feel like Heavy would be the sort of person who'd want to do Ghost Town gunfight. Because I feel like he's not completely soulless. You know, I did complain earlier about making him too cuddly, but I like the idea of him just like wordlessly helping them out with Ghost Town gunfight and just getting rid of the powder gangers for him. Like, Heavy sort of feels like the guy who, at the very least, wouldn't want to be in someone else's debt. So maybe if he wasn't super warm about it, he'd at least be like, I saved you from these assholes. You know what? We're even now. I don't owe you anything. Off I go. The only times Heavy, I think, wouldn't intervene would be when it was purely about politics. For example, during Prim, I don't think once Heavy got his information from Medic, I guess. That'd be a good point. If he ran into Deputy Beagle, would he be like, Doctor, I found you, come here, mwah. Sorry, the intrusive thoughts won. But anyway, once he's tracked down Benny from that point onwards, I don't think he'd really stick around to make sure Prim had law. Because he'd be like, well, the powder gangers are gone. You guys can sort your own shit out. There's no one here I really need to defend at this point. Go do politics on your own. See you, lads. I wonder if Heavy and Boone would be friends, you know? I wonder if they'd have that weirdly sort of like wordless love for each other, if you know what I'm trying to say. Like, I can't imagine they'd be sort of mushy together, be like, oh, we're best mates. But I'd imagine Boone would really like the idea of someone that isn't like always throwing around all these words, and he's like quite the strong and silent type, because I feel like Boone would just jive with that. Although, imagining Heavy picking the little lock on the safe to get the bill of sales is really funny. I can't imagine those really fat fingers of his being very nimble when it comes to opening safes. Either way, I said that he wouldn't be too focused on companions, but I wonder if he would, like, feel for Boone with his stuff with his wife, because I feel like Heavy's also a very family-orientated person, so if Boone is offering to pay, and at the same time, he's fighting for a cause that Heavy can sort of relate to, I feel like they'd almost bond slightly over this, and that's kind of cute. Also, Boone would cover a lot of Heavy's weaknesses, and Heavy would cover a lot of Boone's weaknesses, so they're in tandem. Yes, I am a Boone and Heavy shipper. I love a bit of my Boovie. Boovie is the best ship in the Wasteland, and I won't hear anything different. You know, side tangent, I would love entire comic series of just the mercs individually going through Freeside, because Freeside is one of those areas I love so much, because the ways you can get onto the strip are so numerous and diverse that I'd love to see different ways each character would get across it. For example, Spy is the sort of character who'd just steal an NCR uniform and disguise himself going through the McCarran airport, which is really interesting to think that Spy's entire playthrough would basically be revolving around the disguise system, which isn't something I think we use a whole lot while playing New Vegas. I went into a little bit in the scout video, but the idea that there are all these vices and opportunities to lose money all around Freeside is just really interesting. I think I mentioned I'd imagine Scout would almost, if it was up to him and he wasn't in a story, I think he'd just lose all his money to gambling and just never really be able to make it in. And effectively he'd just become another Freeside junkie at this point. Heavy would at least have the advantage of he's a big guy, so he can get a lot of mercenary work, so that's probably where he'd earn most of his money to go in. He seems like the sort of person who would vibe quite heavily with the Silver Rush. I feel like they're the sort of clientele he'd deal with a lot in the Wasteland, so that's kind of where he'd stick to, you know, most of the time. I can't imagine he'd be a big fan of the Kings, but the idea of Heavy with their hair is the funniest thing in the world, and now I kind of want to see that. I feel like I'm sort of going back on myself now, because I said Heavy wouldn't be very side quest focused, and now I'm thinking, well, he'd need to do an assload of side quest to be able to get into the strip. So actually, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he would be quite side quest focused, because you think if he wants money, he'd be doing as many side quests as he could to get money. So that would be his primary means of, like, supporting himself, essentially. Now, I feel like Heavy would be the sort of character who would go immediately into the tops to confront Benny. Now, Heavy's apparently a lot more intelligent than people let him on to be, because apparently this guy has PhDs in Russian literature, which was very interesting to find out. So I wonder if he'd have the ability to track down all the evidence to prove to Swank that Benny's a naughty boy. So I'd imagine he just shows Swank all the evidence, and then Swank's like, oh, geez, yeah, go punt him. And then Heavy just kind of walks over and just flattens Benny into the ground. You know, like that one shot, is it End of the Line, where Heavy punches the spy into the floor? That just happens to Benny. I love the idea that Heavy just kind of walks over, twists Benny's head 180 degrees, takes the platinum chip and leaves. Could you just imagine the image that would show to everyone else in the casino? Oh my goodness. But I feel like from this point onwards, Heavy's basically a straight shooter. I feel like the NCR, I think that you'd hear them out. I don't think you'd hear out the Legion for a second, to be honest. I can't imagine Heavy caring for the Legion at all. First of all, because they probably can't pay shit all, you know what I mean? Like, you know, I don't know why anyone would actually go Legion. Like, besides role-playing, I genuinely can't think of a single reason you'd want to go Legion. Because, to be honest, you know, they roll over the dam, break apart New Vegas, and then it's like, wow, what do we do now? You get to live in this shack and do push-ups all day and absolutely nothing else. You don't get any alcohol, you're not allowed drugs, not any fun stuff. Just sit there and do exercises. And it's like, wow, what a life. Oh. Like, I can't imagine your average Wastelander has a great life either, but it's got to be better than sit in a shack, not allowed any alcohol. You know, at least they can get pissed up on some jet, you know? But yeah, no, I feel like Heavy would hear out the NCR, but it would ultimately come down to price on who's going to pay him more. And obviously, House is going to pay shitloads versus what the NCR are going to pay him, who are just going to pay him in a medal and some thanks. Wow, I can feed my family with this. But obviously, you know, if Heavy can go somewhere where he's going to get all the money in the world and possibly be able to move his family to a safe place where they're not going to get jostled by the local raiders, I think he'd prefer that over anything else, and that would dictate his decision. Member shoutouts time. Thank you to Irrational Sloth, Brandon Ferretti, Gams, Johannes, Nopals Jesus, Angel Rico, Kamavis, Tucket Flame, Thrawn1, Commie the Cockroach, Gamera, Wilkins Coffee, and Voxes.